Ladies and gentlemen, we are live on Magnetic Reversal News. Thank you all for joining us. Diane Brezzo, FM Steininger, Dances with Dingleberries, Valry in the house. The World According to Jim. And many others. Danger Davis here, Cindy Collins, Fiery Eyes. Tonight we're going to be talking about an interesting geoglyph, and we're going to be researching it together. The geoglyph in question is called the Topock Maze or the Mystic Maze. And we're going to go over some of the archaeological evidence. This location is south of Las Vegas in the Mojave Desert, right across the state line on the Colorado River. So those are the facts, and we'll just let a couple other people trickle in to the stream. 45 watching now. Welcome, Miss Dragon, RS, Dawn. Mr. C is in the house. Okay, so what we're going to do is share the screen. And we'll share a tab right now. Geosites is Mystic. Thank you, Unacceptable. Excellent. We appreciate the super chat. Let me just give some kudos up there to Unacceptable. We are live tonight. Now, what we're looking at right here is better known as Topock or the Mystic Maze. And we're actually looking at it on Google Earth. So I will just pan it out here to show you the Colorado River and the location. Here in Southern California, south of Las Vegas. Oh, we lost it. We'll never be able to find that. I think it's... I do digress. It's above this dam? Yes, sir, man. So you can see here we have Lake Mead coming down, and the Colorado moves south. Here we're at Bulkhead City, Fort Mojave, Catfish Paradise, and the Havasu National Wildlife Refuge. Hello. And this is the Arizona-California state line here, moving up through this region. So this is obviously a desert out here. And what we have happening out here is a situation that is a scientific conundrum. And what I mean by that is that for the last 100 years, this 100-acre site has been very controversial. And the question tonight we're going to answer is the site a result of historic gravel surface mining by the railroad, or is it a prehistoric and ceremonial site that is claimed by Hansel in 1978 in a paper, which was perpetuating an earlier interpretation by some locals? The problem with that is that the natives that were interviewed and the statements that were made are not corroborated by any source. So they could have been made up. In fact, all the information that suggests that this location is geoglyphs and historical and Native American is probably not true. So I got to just make sure we're sharing the screen correctly here. So bear with me. And the question we're going to have is the Mystic Maze near Needles a sacred tribal site or a gravel mining operation? That's the question. So the first thing we're going to do is come and look at the larger map like we did before, but we got a little lost. So you have to bear with us. Here's the Needles Freeway. And here's the Colorado River between Arizona and California at Topock 66. This is where Route 40 crosses the Colorado River. And there is the Topock Maze sign. But if you pan into this territory here, and this isn't the only area that this happens, what you're going to see is these evenly spaced rows of rock that move down slope. They are parallel lines, but in each region, there are unique sets of parallel lines, and then a new set of lines begins. Some of them are intersecting at different angles. Now, this is a very unique landscape. And it has been referred to as a maze site. But this, in fact, is not a true maze. In fact, the site is a series of windrows that are carefully placed in extensive geometric patterns, some of which have been erased, as you can see here, and you can see out here where some of these have been completely erased. But the site we're looking at today covers about 10 acres here. And evidence suggests they may have originally been made only one section in a group of nearby Earth images and features. So what they're trying to say here in the paper is that there are geoglyphs on the river here that have been destroyed because the highway was made. Could have something to do with this hill here, which could be a mound. This could be an ancient mound. And there are several other sites here that could show ancient mound structures. And in fact, there has been archaeological evidence at this site here on the river to suggest there had been an occupation here 10,500 years ago. There's some Clovis stuff going on here near the highway that they destroyed, including a geoglyph, which we were unable to identify because of the construction. But what is still visible are these lines near the geoglyph. So this is what gives, well, it adds insult to injury because it suggests that somehow that these rows of gravel are associated with that geoglyph. Does that make sense to y'all? Because right now I'm sharing the screen. It's hard for me to follow the chat. So just bear with me. I got a dog sneezing here uncontrollably. And here's some other information on the Topock Maze. But let's just hone this in here on the Topock Maze. And let's get a little bit more background information. Important parts of the complex were destroyed by the construction of the highway. We told you about that. And most of the rows are not what they're describing. They're describing the geoglyphs and other historical archaeological sites here by Route 40, not over here. And the question becomes whether or not the geoglyphs in this vicinity are associated with these lines. And it's my position that they are not associated. And we're going to get to some of that evidence in just a moment. Now, the extensive series of uncounted, artificially formed, parallel, alternating rows of mounded gravel and clearings located on a connected series of low, naturally formed terraces near the Colorado River, formerly covered with desert pavement, are completely mind-blowing. A historic transportation corridor through the central portion of the acreage should be noted, and that includes a railway and a highway. And back at the turn of the century, in order to harvest gravel, what you would do is send men out into the desert with rakes, and they would rake up that gravel into rows, and then you would harvest the gravel and use it for fill. Now, there was a curvilinear 100 foot by 60 feet anthropomorphic figure destroyed by the construction of the California Southern Atlantic and Pacific Santa Fe Red Rock Cantilever Bridge in 1888. And during the riprap construction for berm and roadbed for tracks late in 1893, a curvilinear eye feature from Hook and Eye remains intact, almost like the Eye of Horus. The other component of the maze consists of parallel gravel windrows. Now, all the curvilinear features associated with the Mystic Maze are similar to other ground figures on terraces along the lower Colorado River. However, no other examples of parallel windrows of proven Aboriginal origin are known anywhere in the United States. What is known is that there are proven modern or 1800s windrows of gravel raked up by laborers to harvest that gravel. Now, the situation gets a little bit more confusing because interviews with the Mojave Indians, okay, we're still there. Interviews with the Mojave Indians indicate that the windrows are not used by the Mojave tribe, but they claim that these rows were made by the old ones. And this comes from a paper by Thompson in 1929, corroborated and referenced by Hansel in 78. In the 78 paper, Hansel notes that the windrows were probably made by scraping or raking the desert pavement. Well, duh, how else would you make them? But she presents documentation from observers that the maze was present in 1886, prior to the construction of the Red Rock Cantilever Bridge. So, which began in 1888, in fact. But prior to the construction of a bridge, wouldn't you send crews out to, let's say, secure the material you needed years prior, perhaps? Were the Mojaves referring to the intaglios or the windrows? Because there are, in fact, petroglyphs here at the site that were destroyed, geoglyphs. Now, amassing gravel in windrows over 18 acres involves quite a great deal of effort. Who paid for this labor? And why was the gravel not collected or used? There have been historic photographs from 1929, photos from 1897, 1922, 1931 that show gravel rows as steep-sided ridges. Today, they're deflated and, in fact, completely flat. So, that is all the evidence we need to form a hypothesis. Because in just 100 years, the rows are deflated to low, rounded rows. If these rows were steep-walled in 1897 and then flat in 2007 when this paper was written, then the rate of deflation is extremely finite. And what it does is it doesn't allow for the construction of these windrows prior to the mid-19th century. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but no matter what the Mojave Nation says, these are modern mining artifacts on the surface of the earth. And they were done in the vicinity of where they were putting up a railroad here. And any other evidence of them in the location that we're looking at has been erased by I-40's construction. So what guys would do is come out here where it's easy with rakes and just rake up the gravel in a row. See if I got a picture of that here. Can we open that baby up? Yeah. Now, this is what the rows look like today. They're collapsed, but back in 1887, there were reports of them being very steep and vertical. So it would be easy to come in here and scoop them up. But for some reason, they abandoned this area, Topock Maze or the Mystic Maze, because they no longer needed this material. Now, some of the problems arising with this come from the fact that in the 1930s, several groups continued to associate this location with the fact that it was a Native American maze. And this is the problem with human archaeologists, misinformation, and even native tribes that are not remembering their past because we erase them. Everyone makes up a story. How did the gravel get there? Have you ever walked in the desert? It's called desert pavement. When you walk out in the desert, there's no soil. It's just gravel on the surface. And if you have a rake, you could just rake the it's called desert basement or pavement. If you just rake the desert pavement, you're going to just rake up pure gravel into a hill. This is not a controversial idea. This type of gravel harvesting had been done in the late 1800s for railroads across the United States. The only difference from this 10 or 18 acre field is that the gravel was not harvested. In every other instance, the labor was not wasted. But maybe in this location, people became sick. There was enough gravel to go around, and they just kept it moving. And because it's also associated with the geoglyphs on the river, they just blended it all together. Now, here on the postcard, they've got a gravestone here between, and the rows aren't even gravel, they're large rocks. So this postcard is a complete fraud because the rows aren't composed of large rocks. They're composed of gravel, and there's not a single gravestone. This is just another cultural appropriation of something that we did and the Indians adopted and the tourists went to look at. And I can assure you, if you go there, you're not going to see much but a couple straight lines of gravel. So it's not really that fantastic. What is fantastic is the actual geoglyph site we will be visiting in the spring. And so I want to bring your attention to that project. That is not the right. Okay, where is my project list? Right there. Let's go check out the geoglyphs in south central Idaho. Now, these earthworks, when confirmed, will become the most significant geoglyphs in North America. Why no one has noticed these or gone out to confirm their presence is anyone's guess. But these are Native American cardinally oriented geoglyphs around central ponds that are shaped as plus marks or medicine wheels, perhaps, with geoglyphs of rabbits and corn and crescent moons and other anthropomorphic figures. Take a look at this crescent moon here. There are also perfectly circular objects, which could be kivas, that need investigation. We're not going to share these coordinates. Here's a double circle in the region. But here we have a rabbit, another critter, another ear of corn, something else. Repeated again and again in a region of several, this is actually 25 square miles, with older earthworks to the west that have clearly dried up over time. But we can clearly see the plus feature here with a different cardinal direction than the ones here. So this literally could be 20,000 years worth of geoglyphs, which have been hidden from you and all of the world in the Camas Prairie Centennial Marsh wildlife. Well, that hopefully through a drone survey and surficial mapping, we will reveal this to the world in a paper next year on the topic. And that's a boom. So it's pretty much a conclusion here that the Topock, or the Mystic Maze phenomenon, is just a gravel quarrying technique that occurred back in 1880 that was used for the railroad, was adopted and co-opted by the local tribe, and probably was, well, drew money into the region because tourists have flocked to the site ever since the idea was posited. But the scientific evidence shows otherwise, that these rows were once steep back in 1890 and are now flat, shows that they can't be more than 150 years old. So they were probably nothing more than a mining operation in close proximity to the original railroad. And they just happened to coincide with some geoglyphs on the river because Native Americans lived all over North America. I hope you're stoked about the central Idaho finds of the geoglyphs and the ponds and the work we will do. Take a look. This is definitely a rat up in the top here, a corn to the left. Absolutely fascinating. Hope you got something out of the video. The next live stream we do, we're going to be covering, so before we end tonight, we're going to leave you this entire paper. It's completely fascinating. And it goes over all the options: Mystic Maze or Mystic Maze, the amazing archaeological evidence. And it goes over the entire history of the region. The fact that this site was made famous, a Hollywood production. This is where some of the contamination and the groundwater remediation ponds associated with the Erin Brockovich story. Just amazing how time overlaps time. But this paper makes no conclusions, but you can conclude yourself from reading the paper that the three options, the most obvious is that this is a gravel mining operation. When I looked at it from satellite, I thought that maybe the natives were using this to flood the river and using it for farming, but the topography says otherwise. These rows go way up in elevation, and they're not in a single low-lying marsh area. And they certainly look like people raked them up in rows for collection and nothing more. And there's even historic pictures of them being steep and tight as if they were just made versus the modern version, the flattened piles. This is a 1979 picture. And here we have Original images from 1908. You see how steep those are? I think I've proven my point well enough. But the mystery continues. Now, the next live stream we're going to cover is the question: are the impact craters that are well known around the world actually impact craters? Because even though there is evidence of impact structures at these craters, the shape and form and morphology does not suggest that they're craters at all. And in fact, I think that Goss's Bluff, quote unquote, impact crater in Australia is the same thing as Upheaval Dome in Utah. And this is a plasma discharge feature where massive lightning from space hit Earth and created some of the largest fulgurites that we have on the surface of the planet. Oh, let's get a blow up of that. Take a look at that. Now at Goss's we are at Upheaval Dome. At Upheaval Dome, the evidence is that all of these rocks are uplifted as if it was a petroleum dome. We call this an anticline. And then there is geochemical weathering of these rocks indicative of electricity, alternating the sedimentary rock into metamorphic rock through electrical processes. And we're going to dive in to the geology of Goss's Bluff and see if the same thing is going on there. Now, we know there is shocked quartz there, but on our next visit, we're going to get into all of these impact structures and ask the question: are they really impact structures? Did an object really fall completely perpendicular out of space to create this crater? Because there's no asymmetry to show it coming in at an angle. And that is the conundrum with most impact structures. The majority of them show uplift, not downdrop, which is antithetical to impact. So clearly there is something severely wrong with the geologic models. And I've known about this for decades. So we're going to try to uncover the truth as we move forward. I want to thank you all for joining us on the stream. It's been a dream. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Share this with like-minded people. And be safe. We love you. Yes, Montana, fulgurites are awesome. And we will be discussing shock quartz, moldavite, and Libyan desert glass in the next live. That's a boom. In the room.